Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk,
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos.
A Microsoft MVP, Citrix Charter CTP, VMware vExpert.
And your host, Douglas Brown.
Hello and welcome to DABCC Radio. We have a fabulous show for you today. We have a very disruptive, this is like the year of the past couple years, really the past few years of disruption, right? There's all these technologies that are really leveraging this idea of virtualization, not in the way that, it was originally coined, but the idea of abstraction to do some amazing things. And we have one of those guys on today, a company called Sphere 3D. And we have an old friend of mine, a guy I met pretty much, the second week of, I can tell you when I met him, the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th. I met him July 16th, 2001. And pretty crazy, I can remember that. July 16th, 2001. And his name is Jaymes Davis, and Jaymes is if you know Jaymes, you're like, yeah, I know Jaymes, he's great. If you don't, he's one of those guys you just want to sit back and listen to talk and educate you. And today he's going to educate us about, VDI, what Sphere 3D is doing to disrupt that space and overcome some of the, the problems we have, the hurdles we have in that basic idea of slapping a desktop on a server, right? And he's going to debunk a lot of things. It's a wonderful conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I enjoyed recording it. So no further ado, let's jump into my interview with Jaymes Davis from Sphere 3D. Okay, Jaymes, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I'm looking forward to this. We planned this for a while, and we're doing it. We're making it happen, buddy.
That's
what do you
right.
think?
We have been planning this for a while.
Yeah.
But it's always good information. The longer you wait, sometimes it's epiphanies sometimes.
It's the ones that you love, they always put on the back burner, right? So,
exactly.
I've known you a long time, man, and I'm looking forward to. I think this is you've never been on the show before, have you? Have I had you on?
Yeah, I did a podcast for VSX.
That's right. That's right. I thought that what I started to say, and I thought to myself, no, we've talked before. Oh yeah. Gosh, yes, that was a long time ago. Oh yeah, VSX.
I'm going to bring it back next year, so it's going to be a.
And for the guys listening, Jaymes actually put together something years ago when he was a consultant called Geek Day. It was Geek Day, right?
Yeah, Geek Day started in St. Louis, still goes on today.
That's awesome, and there was a nice session. In fact, I was with you in San Francisco, and we heard that Geek Day was going on down the street, so we actually walked into Geek Day, and you're like, I set all this stuff up years ago.
Yep.
And so then you come out to California. We're getting way ahead of ourselves, but then you come out to California. Next thing so you set up VSX, which is a virtual Geek Day, like.
Yeah, in VSX, it was so important because I can't imagine, the idea comes from going to those trade shows, going to Synergies, going to VMworld and perusing all that technology. And, there's so much stuff that sounds really good. And, so what I decided to do was build something where I take all that technology that sounds really good, like it really worked, and put it together. And if it worked, I'm all for it. But most of the time, I have to say 60% of them, really failed the test of working out. And those are the ones that didn't make it into VSX.
That's cool. Well, these guys listening are wondering, who are you talking to, Doug? So let's get this thing going. Jaymes, can you tell us who are you and what do you do over at Sphere 3D?
So I am the Senior Director of Innovation and professional services out of the office of the CTO at Sphere 3D. What I do is I build innovations into the virtualization and application containerization space in today's ecosystems. I did both consulting. I ran at Insys for a long time, director of cloud and virtualization strategies, as well as I became the principal over at SkyCam, is based against a lot of the business architecture that we were really bringing in and really combining the two together. And Sphere 3D seems to be a combination of those two pieces, really understanding that business architecture and the business outcomes that need to come from technology, and understand that the pieces in technology have to be rationalized now so that people can start using them. Toasters didn't become toasters, out of nowhere. They were, first ovens, and, went from ovens to small toaster ovens, and then from small toaster ovens to toasters, right? And during that rationalization, those are the spots where I'm at today. Today, I have a great mantra that I've been working with my team around, and that is decreasing the intermediaries between the users and the resource, making it as transparent as possible for you to get access to the things that you need.
Very cool. And Jaymes, you left out, one of the most important pieces of your history, where you and I met.
Yes. It's been a while, but I've been so immersed in it. I worked at Citrix for a long period of time. That is where me and you first started the trailing the path, blazing the path of glory there. Citrix was a great location to work at. It was during the time of Ed, and Ed brought so much innovation into the conversation at Citrix. It's unfortunate that he's no longer around, but again, the originators of a lot of the remote Windows multi-win capabilities and technologies come from a lot of the Citrix background. And as life's been moving forward, they've been so pervasive, getting into a lot of the different types of technologies and locations. And that's why when, given the effort at Sphere 3D and looking at some of the Glassware technology, I found that the Glassware technology at Sphere 3D has that same overall capability to really make a major difference, because it does something different, but it provides that same easy, capable way of getting access to applications and other devices that maybe we totally didn't think about in that scenario.
I'm really excited about hearing all about Sphere 3D. You've definitely briefed me many times on this, and others also, but this is the goal today, is to talk about what you guys are doing. But I had to point out to you, you're an old Citrix employee. You were there when I started, and as I always say, Jaymes was very important in those days. I was a heavy smoker, and I went outside scared to death, and Jaymes was like, "Hey, man, who are you? Come over here, and welcome to Citrix." And those are the type of people you want around you, because they take away that fear, and they calm you and make you part of the team. And for that, I'll always be in James's debt, because you come out of the channel, come out of Des Moines, Iowa, and you end up in your goal in life is to work for this company, and you're scared to death, and it takes somebody that's a good, down to earth person to bring you to make you feel comfortable, right? And it was a special time in those days. It was a much smaller company that they have today.
But the reach is everywhere now, right? That reach is everywhere. All the people that we really worked with, they've extended and moved into so many areas of the fields.
You got it. Someday I would love to make a chart. I saw a chart once, like a map. They called it the PayPal Mafia, and it showed the PayPal founding and then all the different companies that came out of the PayPal money, right? And
exactly,
Elon and all these others, right? And I'd love to make one from Citrix. The founders of Citrix, the old core group, and all the different places they are now, and all the different companies that spurred off, and I think that would just be such a cool thing. But that being said, so you left Citrix and you went out to California. I remember when that happened. And you went to go see my buddies when I was at Citrix. I was responsible, or I wouldn't say responsible. They're responsible for themselves. I was tasked with helping any way some guy like me could, the amazing Intersys. So then you got to California, you work with those guys, you become a consultant again because you were a consultant prior to Citrix. And then you leave Intersys and Sky Canvas, and you head over to Sphere 3D. What was that like going from, back from consulting back to a vendor after so many years of being away from a vendor? That has to be sort of an interesting experience, right?
Oh my God, it has been quite interesting. Actually, again, working as a consultant, it provides you such a breadth of both customer interaction with the channel, interaction with the different partners, and in such a way that you learn so much on where the technology is going, how these things evolve, how these pieces of technology evolve. I mean, I caveat in two stories where one, working with a customer, he calls me up and he says, "Hey, can I get a battery monitor in my virtual desktop?"
Interesting.
And I'm like, I want to laugh, right? But
like a RAID battery controller,
right? I'm like, okay, well, give me a little more definition about what you're really wanting. He goes, well, I've been using my virtual desktop in full screen on my laptop, and my laptop dies all the time.
Oh, your laptop battery, okay.
Yeah, I would love to have a laptop battery indicator in my virtual desktop, so I knew when my laptop was going to die, because I love my virtual desktop. And it's those type of interactions that you get with customers, and understanding, because that's what puts and develops that innovation. How come why we made a battery monitor that worked inside there, and that spur is very important. And now when he got that, now inside of a new back at a vendor, right? Another great story is people know me from my partner technical advisory board. I've been on the VMware partner technical advisory board for multiple years. I'm a very vocal member of that board, as well as I've been on the Citrix PTAC committees and so forth. And the basis around the partner technical advisory board, and this is a shout out to all you guys, very, very clearly. I hope you're listening. I sit in that meeting, and boy, I would rail these product managers for the multiple different things that they should be making, or how this doesn't work, or how that doesn't work, and so forth, so on. Well, the other day, I held my own desktop virtualization advisory board, and I brought in members similar to myself, so that
I know where this is going.
Right, and I'll tell you what, man, I was ready to fight one of them by the end of this conversation. I was like, you know what? You just shut up, man. I'm just done.
You're on the other side of the table now.
Oh, so, it took me a while. I'm driving home. I'm driving home after this day, and I'm frazzled. And I had to call the guy that was giving me the thing, and I go, you know what, man, I am so sorry. He goes, I've been on the other side so long, I forgot that you're here to really help make the product better, and that's you're the reason that most of the time when you're talking to these product managers and you're in this spot is it's only because I want to win every time, and so I'm with you, and I want you to win every time. And so you're given so much in that conversation, and it's great because it spawns so much innovation again in those type of areas. So I got to say, hey, I understand now.
That's hilarious. It's quite interesting to work for a vendor and an integrator. I came from the channel, as you know, and then I went to Citrix, and now I've been working with ISVs like yourselves, right? And but there's such a difference between the two different sides. And when you have experienced both, you can sort of see things like you just mentioned. You understand why product managers do what they do. You understand life cycle of a product. You understand time to market. You understand what things cost. And then when you're an engineer, you don't always understand that. So, for example, I hear a lot of engineers complain about, well, why are the names in the source code, in the comp files or XML files old? This are these old names. Like, well, yeah, man, we can change these names, but do you understand what that's going to take and time and cost? Do you want new features, or do you want the under the hood, the name to be proper? Really?
Right.
And when you start seeing both sides, and that's just a silly example, but it's an example that really teaches you everything. And so you start understanding why the PMs do what the PMs do. And then you can appreciate the products better, and you can help them better too, right? You can really help, bring a product to market that meets the customer's objectives within the time that they need. It's the old 3 rules to software craftsmanship, right? You can have time, you can have features, or you can have stability. Stability and a good solid product. But you can only pick 2. So which one's going to drop? Right. Usually time is not one that can drop. It should be, but it's not always. Right. So you gotta, it's a balancing act for those guys. I have a lot of respect for PMs. I really do.
Yeah. I'm totally in line with you now. I'm in line with that.
Yeah. Okay. That being said, let's get into this in the sense of Sphere 3D. Who are you guys? What are you trying to accomplish?
So, now that I'm immersed into Sphere 3D, I found that, again, what we're really trying to accomplish is rationalization, right? Rationalized computing is what I call it, because what has happened with VDI, as a good example, is that in the early days, VDI was so expensive, right? The cost per desktop didn't outweigh, right? So it was very expensive. So it only really met real business-driven outcomes, right? I'd have CSOs call me in because they have intrusion in different countries where serial copywriting isn't illegal, right? And so they needed to control those type of desktop environments, and the value at that level is such that the cost of the desktop doesn't matter, right? And then but as time progressed, right, we're trying to get these virtual desktops to, with people, and a lot of the costing didn't work out, right, because we found that it required large amounts of storage and speed and capability. And once we, as in all computing, it gets to a point where, speed and computing is dropped in price. You come back a year later, a year and a half later after that, consolidation ratios are raising, right? The ability to consolidate from 30-1 to 90-1 happened in a year's jump in one situation with the customer where, their total cost of ownership went from $3,000 to $1,000 a pop versus the $4,000 in physical desktop, right? So this rationalization happens, but it was not pervasive inside of all the enterprise. Why is it that you could only take 10% penetration? Why can't I have all the desktops if it became to this level? And a lot of the complexities of virtualization start coming into play. And as you start going down this power curve, right, you start understanding that, the desktop's getting cheaper, but there's an inflection point. And this inflection point is what I call rationalized computing, right? In other technologies, this inflection point helps out greatly because in DVDs or in TVs or technologies on 4K to 8K, they drop in this power curve based on the amount of distributors who can now manufacture this particular thing. But the thing that is so important inside of virtual desktops is the complexity and the understanding of it by professional consultants. And that part is the part that needs to drop. To your point you were making earlier, that's time. Time is labor, right? And in that labor cost, that's the part that needed to come down because the power curve of virtual desktop overall cost still was being affected by this overall pervasive nature, right? And an understanding of getting further down in that power curve, that rationalization to get everybody access to a DVD. Why I can go into Walmart and buy a DVD for $20, even though the technology, 10 years ago was top of the line. It's still top of the line technology. It's just been rationalized to the point where every distributor, all different manufacturers can make it. Well, we've got hardware to that point. Why isn't that virtual desktops still aren't at that level? Again, complexity kept coming back to this conversation. And then when you started looking at the market that is needing virtual desktops, they're the ones that can't be addressed because the complexity of the scenario keeps getting in the way. And so Sphere 3D allowed for an understanding of rationalization of objects and rationalized computing, a layer in which we put on top of our appliances that takes away that complexity and builds in that single pane of glass, that ease of use was key to the mantra there. And that's what's really been pushing a lot of the innovation. I mean, I can't express enough. Again, I love this complexity of Citrix. Citrix is a great scenario, but if I ask you to get a Word document or a Word application to an iPad, you're definitely going to have to build X amount of servers, have this amount of IP addresses, and so forth. With Glassware, I've got an 8-year-old kid who can deploy it in 45 minutes to an iPad off an Azure cloud. Because we've rationalized the ability of the technology. All the same technology is there. I'm not changing Horizon in any way, shape, or form. I'm just building in all the automation and orchestration necessary to make it as easy as pushing the button and a toaster.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you somewhat explained rationalized computing, but can you peel more layers off that? Can you give us more information about this idea of rationalized computing?
Yeah, absolutely. There are in the manufacturing process, and that's an important part about Sphere 3D. Sphere 3D is an amalgamation of multiple companies. Some that were manufacturing before, some that were virtualization and application containerization, some that are storage, huge storage capability within us. And the best part is learning from those different trades, right? Those different trade-offs that are in there. And the manufacturing process that they have for building servers and drives and so forth is one of the top of the line scenarios. So when introducing the idea of Horizon and a hypervisor, adding NVIDIA drivers, adding Apex drivers, just those things alone, I know from installing it millions of times, is a good 10 hours, and that's if I got the software all put together. The latest code, the latest piece, I got it all downloaded already, and I'm ready to go, right? I still got to plug the box up and start somewhere, This ability to use the manufacturing process to layer this onto a box so that it had all these things built into it, and then it had the Horizon view environment components. It has Windows 7 desktop components built into the environment, so that there's a single pane of glass abstraction that allows you to basically take the box, the appliance, right, back to this toaster type idea, take this appliance install it and plug it up, and within a series of keystrokes from our wizard, our DCO wizard, you've deployed 50 to 500 desktops within an hour and a half. This is an example of this level of rationalization that needed to happen over a very complex object like a VDI desktop, right? I'm talking about, it's a full-fledged environment. Just the automation and orchestration has already been built into it.
Very interesting. So how does that affect innovation at your company's Sphere 3D?
Well, it's been affecting us, absolutely greatly. So when you start thinking about the full suite of the Horizon platform, as an example, Horizon's platform for identity management, for containerized desktops, for the breadth of what it can do, again, a large level of complexity. The more devices and things that you have in there, it's the more complex it gets. I can remember, thinking about branding a enterprise web store and pulling SaaS applications within it. I know, from a coding perspective, from a couple of things perspective, it should be a set of hours to do this, days of conversation and interactions and movements. But because we're thinking under that key directive of rationalizing the user experience so that it is as simple as possible, we've really started looking at the 80% rule, right? Okay, what's 80% of the world going to do? And then let's look at that 20% and let's build the packages necessary to manage that 20% conversation. So in the advent that you want to have a flex node in which that's an important piece of this conversation, right? A rationalized computing platform looks at the whole suite of Horizon. The idea of containerized desktops, you know it as well as I do. Zen Desktop, Zen Client was the Citrix component of a containerized desktop. It became too complex, again, in their environment to really work in that nature. Not saying that it's not a complex environment to use Flex, but because we've used it in a rationalized compute way, it's not complex to the end user. So I can literally do a BYOD, right? An ability to say, I can have contractors in tomorrow. I can have a Mac or, Windows devices that get containerized desktops with all the applications and a VPN built into it that goes backwards. And I don't care about the endpoint device. That can be a contractor's, own laptop. To do these things, it would surprise you that, in 2 weeks, based against the right order and a drop of it into your environment, now you can have that BYOD experience for up to 100 users for, pennies on the dollar in the scenario that you're really going through. So that's really the major effect that rationalization of these particular objects are becoming.
Very interesting. So let's talk about the product a little bit more technically and try to, in words, explain what this thing is and how to get this thing deployed and then, and then use it ultimately, right? So can you, how is this, what is it? Is it a virtual appliance? Are there appliances, software? Can you explain that process? What does it take to get up and running? And then what? Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it starts with an understanding of a new way to architect virtual desktops.
I knew you were going to say that, and that's what I wanted to hear.
That's right. Because I think, after being able to look at virtual desktops and the reality of virtual desktops, right? We have been saying this is the year of virtual desktops for, I want to say, since 2006. It has literally been 10 years. We've been ticking away at it. We've been trying this hardest piece. And here is the issues. The first one is that we did well with server virtualization. That's the problem. Let's start there. Server virtualization worked phenomenally well. And the idea of centralizing and building in server to admin ratios that were remarkable to these days to understand resilience and understand, we said, this is absolutely great. We can make desktops do the same thing. And that's a great innovative monument that we all started running towards, except there was a fallacy in that conversation that we never stopped to think about. And that is that there are 100 times more desktops than there are servers in any company that I've ever been in.
Well, and there's also a billion times more applications too that aren't
right.
server. Server applications are written for a server, certified for a server, right? And desktop applications, not so much.
Exactly. Right. So they exist in a distributed computing nature today. There's a reason why the distributed computing nature works. It's because the construct of a desktop, and this is the conversation I get into a lot of times with people who are looking at application specific, is that the construct of a desktop itself is what will never go away, because it gives that level of customization of compute that we can provide in a virtualized environment today. Which sometimes, because the knowledge worker doesn't necessarily know what application he may need to use, the desktop has been our medium for this conversation. The operating system has been our medium for this conversation, right? And when you look at that epiphany that I just talked about, the desktop to server admin ratio, to bring desktops in, my first VDI desktop conversations were, okay, let's do 100 desktops. And that is a stark movement from trying to get people to virtualize 100 servers, right? that POC didn't happen. It was a 10 server POC for virtualization of servers in most situations. It was maybe 30 servers out of 300, maybe 3%, so that you could see that it worked, to make sure it was a viable mechanism, until we're into where it is today, where it's the leading scenario. We tried to follow desktop virtualization around that same thing, but bringing all those desktops back to the data center. Let's look at it that way. We're moving 70% of all that distributed compute, all that piece, into the most expensive hardware environment that we have, a data center. We are increasing the security profile, because this is the most area that's most commonly attacked is desktops, and I'm going to put them right there with all the rest of the golden eggs, right? And when you think about that, and you think about, backup of data and so forth, you're moving all that DASD, that direct access disk that was way out there in the least expensive scenario, and you're moving it back to some of the most expensive scenario. In reality, this is why it's not working. It's in reality, it says, if I really brought all those desktops back here, I wind myself up in two other scenarios, two other very clearly identified scenarios for this level of distribution. But and I'm going to hit those too. But that's key, is understanding, if I do bring all these desktops back to this data center, is where we started looking at what's called distributed desktop hyperconvergence. Right? I call it DDH, distributed desktop hyperconvergence, and understanding that you need to really make these desktops stay out there, make the distribution of the virtual desktop, because desktop virtualization itself is key to what we're actually doing. This is where all the benefit actually happens. VDI is virtual desktop infrastructures, the way I deliver that actual desktop virtualization, and understanding where I'm using a desktop appliance to deliver that desktop out local to that environment is the fastest ability and the fastest desktop I can provide to that end user today.
So you said something interesting, the appliance locally. So where does the appliance sit?
So it's a great question, right? So what I did is we've created our rationalized compute platform. It is a set of appliances, and these are desktop appliances, right? And the key to understanding the word
when you
around
say appliance, we think of a server appliance, like storage
Exactly.
appliance. Is that what you're referring to, or do you have a different definition there?
Exactly. It is entirely that. It is a desktop only appliance. It doesn't run. It's not running your server application environment, right? It's running a vSphere desktop for desktops. It has a ability to run your AD, your view controller, all your pieces that are involved for the view environment to function and work the way that it needs to work immediately. But it doesn't run. It's not going to run your application servers. It's not going to run your SQL boxes. It's not running any of those things. So it doesn't need to be in a data center. It needs to be out at the location. See, an example of this conversation is, I'm going to give you a quick one of a campus. So you have a large campus, a technology campus, and most of the time they don't even have assigned seating. Okay. And a desktop appliance that can go inside of the closets of all 9 buildings, right? And so as people are locally accessing that particular desktop from that desktop appliance, they're getting full capability. They're running on a flash array. Each one of the desktop appliances has a flash array built into it. It has, depending on the type or model, it may have a GPU, it may have Apex cards, or it may have multiple GPUs to provide you the best user experience you can possibly have. As you're moving between those different buildings, as you're connecting into those locations, you have something that you never had before, and that is that true full desktop capability, persistent, but it moves with you. It moves against these different appliances. I'll give you a bigger example of a desktop, of why desktop hyperconvergence works this way. If you think about today's HCI environments, or today's SDDC environments, where they're building a central data center, and they have 100 locations, and they have 40 users in every location. Okay. And that means they basically have 4,000 people coming across the WAN into a single data center, and they have an N+1 strategy in most situations. And right there, you're starting to understand why the centralization of these desktops really is actually a bad idea, because now I have two actual fault points. And people would argue, well, your data center's got great bandwidth, but look how much bandwidth I've got to pay for 4,000 people to come across. Step one. But then two, let's say, of course, I'm never going to have one data center line. I'm going to have multiple, so I'm never going to run out of redundancy in that area. But where I'm going to find actually the more probable location I will come into an internet connection issue is actually at the 100 locations that are in the environment. Talking to large companies, they tell me that it's because they don't own the other side of that remote branch in the internet connection usually, that 70% of the conversation of user experience is argued because of the mismatch of that particular speeds or those capabilities, right? So now you're looking at, okay, if I'm out at the data center, I'm out, the users can't get in. If I'm out at the location, then that means that locations are, starting to drop off and they can't get in. So I have to worry about this level of risk. Now, let's say I decide, let's distribute it. Okay, let's use something like a Nutanix type box or a hyper-convergence box in today. Well, those are all built on SDDC. So they're built so that they have a SAN environment built into them. They've got, all the right controls, that can control this super fast storage, and they can then build virtual desktops on it. And that's absolutely great. But there's still the problem, right? And that is, if that device goes down that's out at that remote office, they're out of luck. And if the connection goes down, back on the other side, they're not, the boxes aren't talking to each other. Okay. Now, this is why I've chosen this approach, why we've chosen DDH. It's because it's decentralized VDI with centralized management. So we built KW Mini appliances, right? It's called a KW because it's a knowledge worker appliance. It can support advanced graphics capability, and it can support up to 67 users per box, right? But we try to keep it within 50 so that everybody's in that right spot. So let's say I have all 100 sites again, and now I have this KW Mini at all 100 sites, right? So 40 users are running at each one of the locations. Now, let's say here I am in that same situation. If the internet connection in my local, site goes down, I don't care because it's running on that local KW Mini, right? That's where all the persistent desktops are at. And they've been there and everybody's there using it. Everybody's happy and doing their thing. They'll wait till the network comes back up and it's in. Let's say the box dies. So let's say the KW Mini itself dies. Well, we've built in DCO technology, desktop cloud orchestration technology, so that the actual appliance, the user's persistent desktops, would actually be in a failover policy. So it would fail over, as long as the internet connection's still there, it would fail over to other particular boxes and run their persistent desktops from those secondary boxes so the end user doesn't even realize it's no longer at that appliance. We'd know the appliance is broken, we'd replace the appliance, and then all the desktops would be able to fail back into that particular desktop environment. Again, not transparent to the end user and automated from the DCO automation. Right. So this is a failover scenario that you can create. Now, what has now happened is that 20 actual remote branches their appliances would actually have to die before any one user is actually out of service. Right. And the likelihood of 20 remote branches dying at once is a lot more improbable than most situations.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I like that idea. So you had mentioned earlier in NVIDIA, and you just mentioned advanced graphics support, and obviously that's a huge one for desktops because desktops is all about experiences. You've mentioned over and over.
Oh, yeah.
Are there things you can't, how do you deal with personas? How do you deal with, profiles? How do you deal with graphics? Are there things, are you giving a local type of an experience? Can you describe that?
Absolutely.
Make sense?
So, yeah, absolutely.
And that's also one of the issues with VDI, right? Is
exactly.
you're putting together a lot of different pieces, which are great pieces.
Exactly.
To give that one, can you give that one, or do we still need an ecosystem? How does that work?
Well, no. So, and that's key, right? Hyperconvergence vendors today, right? The thing that they fell into is building out their boxes so that it produces, these virtual desktops, and virtual graphics have really started building into the opportunity since 2013 when NVIDIA introduced a lot of the vGPU capabilities. Now, the vGPU capability actually opened up something much more important as well, and that is an understanding of a virtual workstation, not a virtual desktop. See, that allowed us to really open up to commercial engineering, geospatial applications, things of that nature that we hadn't had access to before, that all of them have always overshot the TCO. Nobody looks at TCO when I'm buying a Revit desktop, because that Revit desktop is going to build me a $3 million building. At that perspective, it's a cost of doing business to a lot of degree in buying those desktops. But we found that that expense again inflates VDI to such a degree that it becomes much more complex again, and you have these complexities. And so, as a hyper-converged infrastructure player, we decided to not follow through on the storage piece, right? We wanted instead to build out the flash array and give them local ability as fast as possible at all points in time, right? And build out an understanding of where we can put those personas and those profiles so that they have local access and that flash capability movement. Now, going back to the graphics and the understanding. So, as I said before, we have a knowledge worker platform. It goes between 50 to 500 users in a 2U platform. In that same 2U platform, we've created a business graphics and a professional graphics line of actual models. So we have 9 models overall of desktop appliances that you can use to mix and match. Our BG line is the most versatile. We have over multiple K1, multiple K2, and then of course multiple M60s inside of the platform, so that you can go from 1 to 128 graphic desktops. And the versatility in it is such that you can use VDGA on 2 or 3 of the M60s that are in the environment to deliver those virtual workstations. And you can leverage the other M60s in the box to give overall graphics to the rest of the 100 users that are on that box. And that all comes in on that rationalized compute platform, meaning very specifically, you get it, you put it in, within that same day, you should be up running those graphic virtual desktops. It shouldn't be a week's worth of time. It shouldn't be, hey, let's go test these things. It's let's get it up and let's start letting people work with it. A big portion of that statement is the reason that we got to the moon, right? When JFK said, let's go to the moon, and NASA engineers, as engineers are, they look at the entire process and go, man, by the time we get done and we get through QA, it'll be 25 years before we get to the moon. And luckily enough, there was an engineer that came in that says, you know what? He says, instead of that, let's put it all together, fire it off once, and let's see what breaks. And we'll go in and we'll fix those parts, because that is, back to your time, features, and money, right? You can't have all the features. You got to have something that works, and it works solidly, and it works every single time the exact same way. And that's what we built out in this platform. And then you get into our professional graphics model, right? Our professional graphics actually spawned another innovation inside of Sphere 3D, which is a remarkable piece. Our professional graphics, we built this line to understand 2 things. You have a set of users working with companies like Adobe who have large files, but they have single-threaded applications, right? Where they need to have large graphics, but it's about the color pixels and the depth and the reason why I'm using that piece. So we built out an appliance that does that versus a professional graphics model that does large files and multi-threaded applications where you need to run OpenCL or you need to run a Revit in a large where it's crunching large numbers or it's delivering large rendering from that environment. And so we built out these two types of boxes. Now, then we're working with movie studios and companies and animators, and when we put in some of these animators, we noticed one of these key things, and that is, an animator, he will work between Monday through Thursday, and he will work in his wireframes and his skin pieces, and his level of usage isn't enough to warrant that 8,000 or getting into one of our professional graphic boxes, because that one guy, he's only using it between Thursday and Friday is when he's running this 160 frames per second on a 4K monitor animation, so he can see it's actually working in all the pieces. And so we decided to build something that's called autonomous resource scheduling, which basically allows for the end user to work in one of our knowledge worker PC or knowledge worker appliances, and he's doing his regular work, doing everything that's necessary. And on Thursday, he can choose to move to a business graphics unit and run that rendering, run his application the way that he needs to, and then he can release it and go back to the knowledge worker environment. And this allows for a level of concurrency to happen inside of these professional graphics and animators, so that bringing in one professional graphics appliance and attaching it to your existing farm allows you to have users who are complaining about usage or complaining about user experience or such, and they're able to make that move or that shift up to a higher desktop, one that has more memory, one that has more CPU, one that has more graphics capability, and it's at the end user's discretion based on pools that you provide to that end user, right? So you say, hey, I'll give you 4 or 5 pools of these levels, and you're able to decide where you want to go, as well as you can start putting in policies that allow them to go one way versus the other. So this is where we build technology for those 9 appliances, so that you're able to start building this building block of different appliances, ones that need to be in different locations. I'll give you 2 really great examples. We have a company that was building and just recently bought clinics in Hawaii, and the clinics are on the 3 different islands, and they still communicate back to the mainland. And now when you think about desktop failover, right, they have desktop appliances in each one of the locations. So if in the eventuality that one of the appliances dies, the actual failover happens to the 2 other islands inside of that area of Hawaii, without going all the way across back into the U.S. pipe, right? Which is an important capability when you start thinking about return time objectives and capability of getting access to desktops.
Absolutely, Jaymes, you're like Simon, just let you go. And I learned so much. I love this. I absolutely love this. Is really interesting to me. I hope you guys listening are enjoying it as much as I did. This is really, really interesting stuff. So you guys have recently announced, and you've talked about this a little bit, but I had it written down. I wanted to ask it as a pointed question. And so if you've gone through it all, please just tell me and we'll move on. But you've recently announced new appliances. Can you tell us about that? What's in it? Is it, why should we care?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of these...
We know why we should care, because of all the reasons you've told us already. What am I thinking? So ignore the last part. To stay true to the experience, I created a line of what we call the EUC family. Right, the EUC family, or the end user compute family, and that's where all 9 of those models all exist at. And we tried to make it as easy as possible, so that there's a KW or knowledge worker, a business graphics, and a professional graphics. But we also made sure that when you started thinking about a building block scenario, you could easily recognize a mini,
versus a max, right? And so we can provide both mini and max and mid appliances. So in situations where you have 1,000 users that you're trying to bring up, if I asked you today, based on not using one of our appliances and using some other method, I said go build 1,000 desktops. And both of us went into two separate rooms, and I was able to bring in my two appliances, and you brought in whatever you were bringing in. I know that I probably have my 1,000 up within that first 2 to 3 hours before you had your 1,000 up with all the other pieces that you're using, unless you're using my stuff and you just didn't tell me. Because of that rationalized compute platform, it links in and it starts building what you need, and we provide you basically what you need on that platform. And then you're no longer thinking about disaster recovery. And to be clear, we're talking about disaster recovery for desktops, right? When you think about how do you do disaster recovery for people's persistent desktops, and that's a real question I'm asking you. What technologies are there that do persistent desktop disaster recovery?
Well, I don't think there's any that are specific. I mean, it's part of the back, something like the Veeam solution, right? They're not unique to a desktop; they're unique to a
server.
To a server, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
Your methodology,
right?
You have to have a different solution because you're not a server solution, right?
Exactly. So we build desktop recovery, right? So when you fail over from one appliance to the other, you're not failing over into some floating pool that you don't know what the app is. You're failing over into your own desktop, right? Again, that was important in the DCO technologies that we built. When you have the Flex node, right? Again, this rationalized compute platform to bring in Flex, right? I'll tell you how crazy this is. I was working with a company that they had 40,000 desktops and laptops, right? And they used a system within their company to basically order a laptop, right? So each different department would order a set of laptops that they would get from multiple vendors, and then they would have it imaged, right? Except the problem was that they were coming up to the XP end of life, and they had rationalized that based on new purchases and everything of that nature, we're 80% done. It leaves roughly about 6,000 or 7,000 desktops in play, and when you started looking at the system, he's like, well, we're going to either have to go by hand or figure out some type of scripting mechanism or something to try to get that. And, still at that point, you're still in 80-20 in the overall environment. And this is, before Flex this is back in the Winova days, right? And leveraging a technology like Winova, knowing that it took 4 hours per laptop to get the person back to the state that they were in, right? Get their icons back, get their data back onto it. It was a 4-hour conversation. And, taking that away using something like a Flex or when, back in the day, Winova, and delivering a desktop with the appropriate image to the existing laptops that were out there so that you didn't care about XP was so far of a solution. I mean, you're talking $2 million just in the services alone that you didn't have to deal with by following through with that type of technology. And when you see why, desktop virtualization from an IDV standpoint, right, the independent desktop virtualization, where it really focused on desktop virtualization was always key. And so that's when we start looking at this Flex node. This Flex node, right, it's I want to say it's less than 20,000. And, again, most of our appliances that start off in the minis, the KW minis in the $20,000 range, right? You could spend $20,000 and get somebody to come in and tell you an assessment of maybe that you might want virtual desktops, or you can spend $20,000 and have 50 desktops now. And start building your box from there and your block from there, which is an entirely different manifest when you start thinking about doing virtual desktops. Like, people don't really have or thought of it in that nature, and that's really important to us. And so this new product line is all about that. as well as we've also been working with VMware. We are the only other vendor who was really sponsored in their Horizon Air hybrid mode capability for the Horizon smart nodes. So we built out a set of virtual appliances that are just that. They're appliances that connect to Horizon Air hybrid mode, and now you're able to really get the appliances at the remote locations and use Horizon Air hybrid mode to manage the virtualization and the back end, and actually leverage that whole process. The instant forking or instant cloning capability and such are what we've been building into our capability with the smart nodes that we've been putting together for these appliances.
That's amazing. That's very cool, James. So we're running a little bit late, so I want to make I have one more question for you. I have two more actually, and then we'll call this a podcast. But you keep talking about Glassware, and it's a bit different, right? So can you tell us more about Glassware? What is this thing?
So, I love the idea of Glassware, actually. John Morelli, the founder of Glassware, he tells a great story about how it got there, and I think that was the really cool part about Ed Yacobucci is that, when you heard the story of 40 days and 40 nights of him working with Microsoft and getting those things in. And it just brings so much life to the product, right? And John Morelli, he does the same, actually. He gives the real story about Glassware and how, when it was first thought out, it was, when you go into those telephone stores or Sprint or an Apple store and you looking at that new phone, well, it's usually a dummy interface at the point in time when Glassware was created. It would be a dummy interface. You really couldn't go in. You couldn't really show off any of the features of the end device, right? If there was a new camera or a new piece, and you couldn't do it without providing, access of some sort to the operating environment. People making phone calls. I know I went into a Sprint one time when I was, off and used a phone. Hey, yeah, this is another phone. But that's what John was tasked with, was creating an interface, a way that you could deliver applications, a large set of applications to any device, without having to worry about them inputting, something or key code, but in that same extent, lock them out of things that I don't want them to get to, right? Don't let them do this or that. And that was key. But then also what was a major piece of the problem was, oh yeah, by the way, make it run on Symbian, make it run on iOS, make it run on Android, make it run anywhere, on any of these type of phones or mobile devices. And so that's what, John set out to do. And he really, starting and building out an example of what a RDP or RDS type device does as far as the delivery of it, but more so of the emulation of the type of application that the application needs and deliver it. And so that's, how Glassware really got built out. And so when you start looking at the applications of Glassware, immediately it actually lends favor to that 30% of applications that didn't work in Citrix, that you don't know how to virtualize, or that are on XP, or that are inside of an old Paradox or Foxtrot database, but you're still needing to get to Windows 10, right? These applications can be installed the exact same way they're normally installed into Glassware and delivered out via HTML, Java, or a Connect client. So, everything from a, mainframe application, and, if we have the right chipset, to a 16-bit app, all the way through to, the most modern application that's out there. One of my favorite demos that you can pick up on YouTube is Peter Tassiopoulos doing we took Windows 3.1 Notepad, deployed it via Glassware to an iPad, and used Siri to dictate to Notepad. Right? Cool. Right? It's just cool technology, cool that that's not the intent of it, but it's the purpose of seeing exactly how far we can take it. Right? It is something that has become very, very important in the way that we've been delivering it. So integration and the containerization of Windows applications is exactly what Glassware does. So if you have an IE browser 6 and you need that IE browser 6, there's a Citrix solution for that unfortunately is a little more complicated as a conversation. Whereas, you could literally install IE6 inside of a Glassware appliance the way that you install it on your desktop and deploy it out to, as many people as you wanted, because Glassware comes in two flavors. One, it can come as an appliance inside of Azure. So, of course, it's as much horsepower that you give it is what the appliance is. And, of course, you can have multiples from that overall stint of it. Or it's a physical appliance that you can have inside of your walls where you're running directly off of it. I mean, the way Glassware works, I've seen some very amazing things with web browsers. You're going to start seeing some more things with Glassware and secure web browsers in which, because we can run, every type of web browser concurrently on the same platform, when you think about browser testing, you think about applications that require browsers to be with a certain subset of Java and a certain subset of this or that, and you don't want to go through V, or you don't want to go through any of the packagers, and this needs to be fast and quick. Definitely look at a Glassware to get these things into play. As well, Glassware is getting out there in multiple different areas for schools as a great example. Those school applications like Reader Rabbits and some of the ones that require access to sound cards as an example, because our appliance and the way that we do application containerization with that emulation, it allows for us to work with Reader Rabbit to make sure we're redirecting sound and make sure that we're redirecting dictation and voice input. When you're looking at a lot of the applications that were written for a person to be standing right in front of them, not multi-win, those are the applications that installed on Glassware allow them to become multiple access, multiple interface, and multiple capabilities.
Very interesting. Jaymes, we're right at the time I like to stop these things. I have one more question for you. That's phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. I can't wait to learn more. Although I feel like you tell me everything, but not everything I need to know, but I love it. So that being said, what's next?
So what you're going to start seeing is we're actually going to start campaigning and bringing a lot of the DDH message out to the masses. It is a different way of looking at virtual desktops. It's a different way of looking at it from a virtual appliance perspective. And we're going to start going to some of these VMUGs that are around. If you're a VMUG and you want to have somebody come talk to you about the distributed desktop hyperconvergence, please hit me up at Jaymes.Davis at Sphere3D. And if you know me, my name is spelled Jaymes. But we're actually going to start campaigning. We brought on great partners like Intersys who are out there. They're delivering on some of these particular appliances. So the Smart Start and the capability of getting an appliance, dropping it into your location, and kicking up 50 desktops is no longer a laborious process of weeks of interviews and agents on every desk and none of that. If you want to make sure that you have the fastest, capable, the one that's really looking at user experience, definitely look at our appliances, because that's where we're going to be at.
That's awesome, Jaymes. And my very last question is, you just said it, look at our stuff. If they want to learn more, what do they need to do?
So if you get a chance, hit my blog up. That's going to be on the Sphere3D site or on the dabcc.com site. If you want to know more about any of the products, definitely hit up go to our website, sphere3d.com, and inquire in. We'll be more than happy to come out, talk with you guys, really show you the value of what we're talking about. We have the ability to do health checks on your existing environment. We have the ability to do a lot of the things that you're looking for, so that you can start moving into a centralized management, right? A way that you can actually When I ask you to go find Maria and turn off Maria's desktop, there's one console in our environment that you go to, no matter where Maria's at in any of the 100 sites that she was supposed to be at, we're going to be able to, from a single console, turn that off. And that type of innovation at that level for desktop administrators is where we're going for in our next steps.
That's awesome. Jaymes, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We're right in an hour. So let's call this thing I've enjoyed it completely. This is wonderful. You completely you brought me up to speed, and that's what I wanted. So guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Definitely check out what Jaymes and gang are doing. It's not just Jaymes. There's a whole gang of guys over there that are just phenomenal like he is. So
Bookman, Simon Branford, these guys are all they're giving their mind share, and it's really been great.
Yeah, Simon's a beautiful guy too. That guy's just awesome. So, well, let's call it a show. Sound good, Jaymes?
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Doug. Hey, I really appreciate this. Great to the viewers and the listeners. Keep it tracking, man.
Keep it tracking. Thanks, buddy. You take care, and I'll chat with you another day.
All right.
Okay, so that concludes that's a great episode of DABCC Radio. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot, as much as I did, about what they're doing over Sphere 3D. That's a horrible word for me to say. I always had trouble with vSphere and Sphere 3D. You're like, Doug, say it like this. I know. It just doesn't come out of my mouth. I'm not so, it's a guy that does podcasting. You think I could talk, but Anyway, I really enjoyed it. Jaymes did a phenomenal job. Just wind him up and let him go. That was just totally phenomenal. I love it. And definitely check out what these guys are doing. It's disruptive and it is awesome. So, what I said, head on over to the website and learn more. And on that note, definitely check out the new DABCC. If you've been listening, you've heard me talk about it. It's a ground-up rewrite. It is simple. It's easy. It is wonderful. And I've had it last week at Synergy. I had just one, or a couple weeks ago at Synergy, I had just wonderful feedback. So people are liking it, and I think you will too. Check it out. And if you do like it, drop me a note and let me know what you think. If you don't like it, drop me a note and let me know what you think. Because as I always say, you never learn anything by being right. You only learn by when you're wrong. So I love being wrong and I love to learn. So please educate me the way Jaymes did today. This is great. So, what else do I say? But thanks to each and every one of you for listening to DABCC Radio.
Say DABCC?
DABC.
Say it again, DABCC.
DABC.
Can you say it again, DABCC?
DABC.
How about DABCC?
DABC.
DABCC.
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 DABCC.